them to Euston on a journey that should have lasted 8 hours. The original train was shunted into a siding for further examination and forensic tests.
Milk is going up by 1.5 pence a pint. From June the 3rd in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, the price of a pint will rise to 15 pence. In Scotland, the increase is effective from July the 15th. Kate Adie asked Agriculture Minister Peter Walker if the rise was absolutely essential.
Alas, yes, and it's a rise that should have taken place in April. And the normal time for review was the beginning of April, and the government decided not to. They deferred it through April, and they deferred it again on May the 1st. And I inherited a dairy industry whose costs had risen, and producers whose costs have risen also. And there's a mechanical way of adjusting that, which the previous government used. I've used exactly that formula, and I'm afraid that gives this rise of a penny halfpenny.
5 years ago, a pint cost 5 pence. Since then, the price has trebled, and we've drunk less. Not unconnected facts. So the Consumer Association's reaction of dismay today joined the National Farmers Union regret that producers aren't getting much out of the increase. And the chorus of complaint also includes the dairy industry's fears that consumption will decline. No one's pleased. It's calculated the average family drinks 16 pints a week, so the rise will cost them 24 pence. But no agriculture minister would dare make comforting predictions about dairying. And this rise is mainly to cover wage settlements already made. In a few months' time, the farmers will be talking about a better return for their product. The price of petrol will affect distribution costs, and there's another battle looming in the Brussels cow buyer over the actual amount of milk British farmers should produce.
Despite the rise, the prices of milk products like butter, cheese and yoghurt won't be affected. And there was a comment about the milk price increase from Mr. Pryor, the Secretary for Employment. He was asked about it in a somewhat unlikely place, a Merseyside car factory. Nick Clark again.
Mr. Pryor had hoped to meet the shop stewards representing Vauxhall's production workers before his tour. They declined the invitation, but some of their members were much keener to speak to him.
I want to ask you a question. How are you going to control wages and the forthcoming massive inflation we're going to have if we get hammer blows that we've just had at 1 o'clock? 1.5p on milk. This is only one, Jim. You've had 7 in already, and you've been in a fortnight.
My dear chap, you can't blame us for the price of milk going up already. I mean, a lot of these things have been in the pipeline for some while. I know it's going to be difficult. We're going to have a rough time on inflation. And obviously this is going to create problems for us over the next year or so. But if we can only hold things at a reasonable level, then we can get on top of it. But a lot of this has been in the pipeline for some while, as you know.
Really, Jim, but you've got one hell of a tough job. You've got the toughest job in the cabinet, haven't you?
I know that.
Yeah.
And I want you to help me.
In that other big price rise, most of the big oil companies have now followed yesterday's lead by BP and Burma in putting up their prices. It'll mean about another 5 pence a gallon at the pumps. Esso, Shell and Texaco all announced increases this afternoon. But an increase in petrol tax now looks unlikely. The government is considering dropping plans to switch car tax from vehicle excise duty to petrol tax. The Transport Minister, Mr. Norman Fowler, says he's reviewing the whole operation of vehicle excise duty, but will not be going on with talks started by the last government on the change to petrol tax. There's been no further announcement from the government on whether it plans to allow refugees picked up by British ships to come to this country. The Hong Kong government has expressed disappointment at yesterday's statement that the British government would not give an open-ended commitment of accepting responsibility. More than 34,000 refugees from Vietnam have now arrived at Hong Kong, including nearly 1,000 on board the British freighter Sibonga. The Sibonga is anchored in international waters just outside Hong Kong, after picking up the Vietnamese from 2 boats in the South China Sea. Many had paid about £1,000 each for a place on the boats. Our Far East correspondent Jim Biddulph reports.
This afternoon, the Sibonga was still not allowed to enter Hong Kong harbour. But although they did not know when or where they'd be allowed to land, the refugees looked cheerful enough as supplies were hoisted on board. While I went to have a look at the freighter, urgent consultations were going on about its fate between London and Hong Kong. The ship's master, Captain William Martin from Lisburn in Northern Ireland, described for me the condition the refugees had been in when he rescued them 100 miles off the Vietnam coast.
Some of the men made it, but the majority of the women and children we hoisted aboard in a large box inside a cargo net.
And then there was another boat.
About 5 miles away, when we completed that operation, I got the same signal from another boat. We went to him. His story was the same. He was a smaller boat with just under 400 people. Same conditions. And as we come alongside him, he buried a baby that had died a short while ago. Both masters of both boats had stories of already having buried several small children.
If you had not picked them up, how long would those boats have lasted?
The boats might have lasted a while, but the people would have died.
In how long do you reckon?
I reckon a lot of the children would have been dead in 48 hours. Some of them, when we brought them on board, were unconscious, completely exhausted.
Now, the British government has, or appears to have, changed its policy. What would you do if you came across this situation again?
I am bound as a British shipmaster to render assistance to anybody that requests it.
When the decision was made and the people started to come on board, well, as I said, we were busy, and as I saw a baby floating in the water, which I was very sick at seeing, and after that I was so busy that I didn't have time. We didn't know which way to turn. Babies crying and screaming, and well, it was just like as I say, it was just like a nightmare. I don't think I'd ever like to go through it again.
So did you have second thoughts about all this, that maybe it shouldn't have been done?
No, I haven't, because when I looked out the next day and I saw the boys, 7, 8, 9, playing on one of the hatches, and my husband and I looked out both and we said, we couldn't have left those people. No way could you leave people like that to die.
And so tonight the Sibonga is still out there in international waters with the captain wondering when he's going to be allowed in here into Hong Kong Harbour, and whether he's going to be allowed to unload not just his general cargo, but his 982 refugees as well. This is Jim Bidov in Hong Kong.
Another British freighter, the Roach Bank, with 290 Vietnamese it picked up, has been stopped from entering harbour in southern Taiwan. The Taiwanese government says it will not accept any refugees on board foreign ships. And here at home, 4 Cambodians arrived at London's Heathrow Airport today, after the government made them a special case on compassionate grounds. They're the first Cambodian refugees to be allowed into this country. Israel today hauled down its flag over El Arish, the first town to be returned to Egyptian control by the Middle East Peace Treaty. Along with El Arish went a thin sliver of land connecting it with the rest of Egypt. The town had fallen to the advancing Israeli army during the 1967 war, and for the past 12 years it's been under military occupation. Even the return of the town this morning was, as Keith Graves tells us, a military affair.
It was impossible, really, not to draw a contrast with the last time the two armies stood face to face at El Arish. It was a brief encounter and disastrous for the Egyptian army, routed by the Israelis. But today in El Arish, it was not the time nor the place to recall such things, as the two armies faced each other once again across a canteen car park. Not an auspicious location.